Hello and welcome to another match preview here on my channel. Delighted to be joined by Luke from Swans Cast as we face Swansea on Saturday night. So how are you doing, Luke?
Yeah, doing well. Thank you for having me on. Yeah, it'd be good to chat about the game.
Yeah, and as for talking points going into the game, I mean, Blues have just had the fourth round FA Cup tour draw tied up, and then you've had your third round tie against West Brom where it went the distance, but just fell short on a penalty shootout. What were your thoughts on that game?
Yeah, I think it was a bit frustrating that we didn't win, perhaps in the regular time. When you don't do that, you kind of always open the door to anything that can happen, really, in extra time and penalties, especially. And that's what happened. We actually both teams scored five penalties, and it came to sudden death where the misses start to count. And I think perhaps pressure got to some of the less experienced players, but that's what can happen in the cup. At least, it's probably not end of the world sort of stuff. And in the position we are in the league, it's probably we can just go and focus on that anyway. So yeah, it is what it is, but we just move on now.
As you said, full focus on the league, and you guys find yourselves in 17th place at the moment, actually
Yeah.
only 2 points off of Blues, so you'd overtake us with a win. So, with Vítor Matos' reign in charge at the moment, it's been, what, 2.5 months in charge, and what would you make of his tenure? Because upon the appointment, I thought it's someone, not a lot of experience, but he has also shadowed a lot of top managers. So, with what you've seen at Swansea at the moment, have you been confident in his abilities?
Yeah, I mean, you could say it's a out of the blue appointment. Obviously, you only had, what, like half a season of first team management before he came to us with his team in the Portuguese league. Yeah, he's been under Klopp in the past and all that sort of stuff, but perhaps, at this level, not that much experience as the top man. But then Alan Sheehan was the same. He's only really done the head coach role when he was caretaker for us before he had the first role. So we've got history of doing that. So based on what we've seen so far, though, I don't necessarily think it's been a bad appointment. I think what he's shown so far has been really good. There's been really good signs regarding the progress that we are making, and that's the sort of progress we were missing under Alan Sheehan from earlier in the season, which obviously would have been nice had it happened earlier in the season. We obviously had damage done to our league position already, but I do think we've turned a bit of a corner. There's still definitely issues that need fixing. I'm not really sure it's something that could be fully fixed mid-season. Probably needs a transfer window or two or a bit of money available to spend specifically regarding chance creation and some of the creativity behind the forwards, just to make them have better chances that we can actually convert. Um, but up until we're able to fix that properly, he's done a better job with the tools that he's got at his disposal. So I'm hoping that that can continue. But all the signs are positive so far.
You say about creativity there, and I've just got on my paper here that Swansea have scored in 10 of their 11 games during Vítor Matos' reign. So you've been scoring goals and also been keeping a clean sheet here and there. So I'd say the performances have been an improvement on what was towards the back end of Alan Sheehan. And obviously, in that time, we did beat you guys with a last minute
Yeah.
Lyndon Dykes winner. So from then to now, you say about the creativity. Could there perhaps be some transfer activity in January that rectifies that? Because we've seen at the moment that Joel Ward's been brought in at the back. So are Swansea interested in forward players as well?
Yeah, there is interest. We're looking at Saki on loan from Palace, but I'm not sure if that's going to get over the line. There's a couple of teams interested. We'll have to wait and see until he's holding that shirt. Not really sure, but what else? I think whatever business we do isn't going to be massive. I don't think there'll be any big fees. It'll be if anything comes available to us at, cut prices or loans probably is where we're looking. Just to try and bolster what we've already got. That's what I don't necessarily think all the problems will be fixed now. They could be probably more of a summer, or we need someone to leave to generate a bit of flexibility with the resources that we have, which don't know whether that will happen either at this stage. So it's not ideal, but hopefully they can plug some holes in some way, shape, or form. And as regarding last time we played, probably wasn't. I think when we played last time, Alan Sheehan was doing still okay. It went a bit downhill after that. I think that game we were probably frustrated to not come away with a point in the end, at least. I can't remember for sure, but if there was something that happened earlier in the game that I think maybe a penalty shout that we had that we thought should have stood, but obviously didn't happen. Can't rest on those laurels. Or was it an offside goal? Is that
Yeah,
is that
Viv
if I'm
Hopnick scored
recalling
where it was
right?
onside, but the
Yeah,
referee flagged for, or the assistant flagged for offside.
yeah, that's it. Yeah, so that was a bit frustrating, but I think in the balance of the if you look at the stats of the game, probably you maybe deserve to win as the home team. But when it's such a late equaliser, and I think that was back earlier in the season when they were adding the stupid amount of added time on, a bit frustrating. But all of our games in that stage of the season were going in that way, where it was really tight. We were in a lot of the games, perhaps not doing enough going forward, or when we were on top, we weren't getting the goals. And then it just went worse and went backwards. And you mentioned some of the improvement under Matos, and we've scored in like 10 of the 11 games and has some clean sheets. The team, for whatever reason, after we played you last time, just lost its structure. So even though we only lost 2-1-0, I think we probably looked a bit organised and perhaps we were a bit hard to beat. That seemed to disappear. But it seems like Matos has brought it back and they all know what they're doing again. They've been more organised. Um, and yeah, in terms of the goal scoring, we have scored in a lot of matches, but we don't create an awful lot of chances, and a lot of our goals are quite good goals regarding the effort. Like it's not, the XG of this is probably quite low. Um, More often than not, like some of the strikes from Vopotnik, for example, or Galbraith that we've had this season have been really good goals from outside the box, or goals. We'll have a good highlight reel at the end of the season, put it that way. But you can't rely on that, and I think that's why we are where we are in the league table at the moment. Really, that is the reason for it, because we're just relying on these spectacular efforts too much. It's getting better, but it's still not quite enough. So yeah,
I remember that game against Nottingham Forest in the cup. There was some good goals in that game, wasn't there?
yeah, definitely.
Yeah, that was like a standout moment for me. Like obviously watching Swansea from afar and seeing what you guys were up to. And obviously at
Yeah,
the start of the season there was a lot of noise around ownership because of sort of external investment from the likes of Luka Modric and Snoop Dogg and all that stuff. And I remember speaking on TalkSport too, I believe it was with yourself as well,
yeah,
wasn't it? Where it was talking
yeah,
about,
yeah.
the difference I suppose in our ownership and your ownership, but coming from the same country or whatever. But with Swansea's ownership at the moment, what are the fans' attitude towards the hierarchy?
I think it's quite positive. I think there's a bit of frustration towards the end of Alan Sheehan's reign about the fact that they'd appointed him, and obviously in hindsight, that's the wrong appointment, or perhaps how they waited long to get rid, or when they got rid, it was positive again. But then the fact that we didn't get Hellberg, who went to Middlesbrough, that ruffled a few feathers in the fan base. But like, no one knows fully what goes on behind the scenes. I think it's harsh to jump on it and say it's the board's fault. It might not have been. Maybe the manager never wanted to come, and there's agents involved, and it's the same as what happens with players, isn't it? They all want the best deal, and they'll play clubs off until they get that. And ultimately, if you just look at the league table, one of the job was a far more better prospect than the other at the time. So you can't really blame the decision that was made there. But obviously, they moved quick then to bring on in Matos as the second choice. Let's say they saying he was always the man, but depends what way you want to look at it. But he's done a good job, hasn't he? So like, if he was the backup plan, he's still done a decent job. And I think if you compare the records of both managers, they're not really that far apart when it comes to points earned since both have been appointed. So I don't think necessarily it's been a bad outcome ultimately. I think what happened was everyone got excited over Hellberg. Matos got brought in as a bit of an unknown, and that just upset people. But I think a lot of turned round now to actually appreciate Matos has done a decent job, and they are all backing him. But in terms of the respect and the sort of view on the board at the moment, it's far better than it has been in recent years with the previous ownership. So we're in a good place. There's a bit of sort of like noise about maybe because of where we are on the table, some fans saying like focus more on the performances on the pitch and the on the pitch activity than all of the stuff that's not on the pitch that is going on. All the commercial stuff that you see, and they've opened a bar in town, and there's all this other stuff that's going on. Um, but I think it's hand in hand, isn't it? The bigger picture, like you've got to generate the money to then invest in the squad and improve the squad on the pitch. So it's obviously getting the balance right, and you don't want to. I think when you're advertising on your social platforms, is when you're not perhaps doing well, is when it upsets people. But yeah, I think generally the feeling is quite positive with the ownership at the moment. So hopefully it continues to be that way.
And with Swansea's style of playing, like the philosophy of the club, I remember sort of in years gone by, the managers that have been hired by Swansea have been very much like possession based and, playing out from the back and that. Has there been a bit of a change in style, or has Vítor Matos been brought in to play that style of football?
Um, Sort of been brought in to play that style, but I think in his own way. I wouldn't say he's necessarily the most typical version of that style. There's definitely depends on the opponent, but there's been some games where we're quite high on the possession stats. I think against West Brom in the cup just gone now, we were dominating the ball. But then there's been times where we have had to sit in and we're quite good on the break and a bit more direct than we have been, which is something I think we do need to adapt to because that's what football is these days. And that's perhaps something that the Swansea way or the way that we've played historically hasn't done. So I think that's where Matos and his own version of it can step in. So being able to sort of do both depending on what's in front of you will be better, perhaps, for what we need going forward to sort of progress because football changes at the end of the day. Um, but ultimately, we do want to play on the floor, play in a decent attacking way, in a way that looks nice on the eye, which I think is what most fans want. But if the results are coming, I'm sure that that will please them anyway. But we'll have to wait and see how it pans out. Perhaps with a bit more of a sample size, it's always hard to judge a manager's style when they come in mid-season.
And it's fair to say that Blues have been a mixed bag away from home this season. There's not been a whole lot of wins, and we've certainly been better at home. So away it would be a tougher task for us. And with Swansea this season, have you sort of come up against opponents where their play style is more suited to you going at them, or has it been a thing where you benefit from teams sitting back and then trying to break them down?
I think we struggle when teams sit back and we try to break them down, to be honest. I think that's where the lack of creativity I mentioned already probably shows itself in the worst case. Um, but we've kind of always had that when we've played this pass in football, when teams do a low block and sit deep, we've always found it a bit tricky to break that down. But yeah, so it's probably better if teams come at us a little bit. I think the direct, I just think that's the way the modern football is at the moment. I think a lot of goals are scored in that way where teams are quick on the break and quite direct in the transition. I think teams are so well set up these days that it's quite difficult to break down a lot of the times. Um, yeah, specifically for us, we don't do very well against that sort of the defense. I mean, there is a way of perhaps holding on for too long. Like if you look at the Wrexham game we had a couple of weeks ago, where when they went 1-0 up, that's all they did for the rest of the game. It took us a while, but we got over the line in the end, bit unspectacularly with the two efforts. Being you could say an element of fortune with both of them. Um, but yeah, we don't. Other than that's probably actually the perfect case to explain what I'm saying. We didn't create an awful lot, and it took two lucky goals for us to get over the line. So you're not going to get that every week. So I'm not sure how you will set up away from home, but if you do sit back, you probably have, I would say, a better chance because we probably struggle a little bit to break you down.
And with the attitudes this season going forward, like, would you say that you're looking up or just being wary of like what's below you? Because the championship is so congested, isn't it? And the team can just make a late break for the playoffs or whatnot. So with Swansea at the moment, are you still optimistic that this can be a season to remember?
I don't know if it'd be a season to remember. I think it's probably quite difficult to get into the playoffs from here. I'm not saying it's probably not impossible, but I don't see some massive investment in January, and it will take a massive turn of form and fortune and consistency and all of that to turn it around. I think some of the teams up there have been quite good all season. So, and what's the difference at the moment? 9 points. And as for looking the other way, it's 8 points. I think we've pulled ourselves away from that a little bit more than we were a couple of weeks ago. We were level on points with the team in 22nd, near the time Alan Sheehan got sacked. So to have an 8 point cushion now shows the job that Matos has done really since he's come in. So I'm not saying that we should be complacent against what's below us because we can easily get dragged back in, but I do feel comfortable enough that we should be looking up the table. I think somewhere in the middle realistically would be a fair result for what we should be aiming for this season. And to be fair, that's what I think I said near the beginning of the year was somewhere between the 10th, 12th, 13th sort of region, which is quite similar to last year. Um, I do think that's where we should be aiming, really. Maybe a little bit less now, given where we're coming from. But we did basically the same thing last year with a really, really good, strong end of season run. So when a couple of teams are on the beach, but we'll see what happens. I think this year just needs to be a case of Matos building now. Hopefully, and this is kind of what I said last year with Sheehan, hopefully then we can just have a consistent season next year with the same manager in for the entire year because 3 years on the bounce, we haven't had that. And you're always going to struggle when you don't have that consistency, I think, in any league. And the more you do that every year where you chop and change in, eventually it's going to bite you. So we need to just have a manager that settles and has stability and doesn't perhaps go on a bad run of form that results in a change. And it'd be nice to have that, even if it doesn't mean playoffs, just something consistent that we're all content with and we can build on going forward.
2025 was the first year in a decade where we've had the same manager for a calendar year. So I completely get
Yeah,
what you mean about just having stability at a club.
yeah.
And as for the game on Saturday evening, what are you thinking for a score prediction? What kind of team do you think is going to line up for Swansea and players to look out for too?
I think the team probably wouldn't have too many changes. I think it would be Vigoro in goal. You'll have a back four, Timon, Burgess, Cabango, and Galbraith. Galbraith being one of the ones to look out for, and Timon, to be fair, on the left. He's probably our most creative player from left back. Timon, again, he's a midfielder, but he's playing right back at the moment. Um, Probably our best midfielder at the club, but also kind of doing the best job at right back. But he tends to drift into the midfield when we have the ball. So you'll come. I mean, you see a lot of that these days in football. I think like Trent did it for Liverpool quite well, but he does. He joins the midfield, becomes our fourth midfielder, and just kind of free roams a bit. And but then he's quite good at getting back into position. So he's one to look out for. And I think recently he's actually been operating a bit better in that role because nobody really knows how to mark him, rather than being in a static midfield position where you know you need to mark him a certain way. So that's one area to definitely look for. In midfield, then I would imagine it would be Stamenic, Franco, and Vidal going into the forward line. It's difficult. There is sometimes some chopping and changing, but I would imagine it'd be Ji-Sung, Vipotnik up front, and Ronald as the front three. The wingers are not always, as productive as they need to be, especially Ronald. Scored in the cup game, so it'd be good to see if he can continue that sort of confidence going forward. And Vipotnik obviously he's been quite lethal this season for us. But again, he's probably been starved to service. So the fact that he's on the goal tally that he's on is quite unbelievable. But if you look at his highlight reel, he's capable of scoring from quite difficult positions. He's got good shot on him, quite a powerful shot. So again, he's another one to probably keep an eye on in terms of if we're going to score, he's the most likely outcome of that. And score prediction, how I think the match is going to go. I think it'd be quite tough for us, but we have been, I believe, don't quote me on this, but I'm sure we've been unbeaten at home under Matos since he's come in. So I'd like to say he can continue that. I'm not necessarily 100% confident of a win. So I'm going to go like 1-1, I think would be probably quite a fair prediction.
I imagine both teams will score because of what I said about Swansea's scoring stats under Matos and our inability to keep a clean sheet at the moment. So I just don't think it's going to come away from home where we've been struggling anyway. But I'd say if we were to nick it 2-1, that would be positive. And I'm just hoping now that Kyogo can get a run of form going because it took him ages to score, a goal besides the opening cup game of the season against Sheffield United. And he scored against Cambridge. So I think Blues fan just hoping that he can get a bit of a run going. And I'd favour us going forward, but at the back, I'm still kind of worried, especially if you guys have like a 4-3-3 shape, because we have something quite similar with our fullbacks where they get quite advanced with Kai Wagner, our new signing, who has got a goal and assist in his first two games, but obviously plays very far forward. And then you've got Tomoki Iwata, who is just up and down the pitch so much and does what Galbraith does, where he just gets in position quite well. But obviously, it does take a lot out of him, and with the amount of games that we've had recently, it could cause some trouble. So I'm going to say that Blue's going to nick it 2-1, but nevertheless, a game that I'm very much looking forward to. And thank you so much for your time, Luke, and just shout out to the people watching about what you guys are doing on your channel at the moment.
Yeah, we generally just do podcasts, and I do match previews similar to this one. So there'll probably be one of these if you want to check out the other perspective. But yeah, just type in Swans Cast. You should find us on YouTube or any of the podcasting platforms. And if you want to listen to us rambling on, that's where you can find us.
Thanks so much for your time, Luke. And as for me, I'm going to carry on the match previews right now till the end of the season and also do some videos here and there talking about the January business. So if you enjoyed this video, like, share, comment and subscribe. And most importantly, keep running.